You have just found another episode of Austin Tech Connect. This is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. For those of you who don't know, the Austin Technology Council has been around 33 years, and our purpose was to help grow and connect the tech ecosystem. Fast forward to today, our charge isn't that much different. As we get larger, the community gets more diverse. We need a group that's going to be that thread that runs through everything and helps pull all of tech together, whether it's med tech, fintech, semiconductors, software, space tech, defense tech, etc. We need to have somebody who is that thread that goes through, and that's the job of the Austin Technology Council. So thank you for tuning in and listening to our podcast, and make sure that you're telling all of your friends about ATC. So speaking of all those different verticals, today we're going to talk about space tech. Now, I don't know that everybody realizes, we know, of course, that, Elon has moved his companies here, but I don't think a lot of people realize how much is going on in and around Central Texas and throughout Texas where it comes to space technologies and the future of space. And there's a brand new organization called the Space Workforce Incubator for Texas. And they are holding monthly events talking about just that. How do we go on and build everything so that Texas is the center of the universe when it comes to space? And today I am joined by Leon Vanstone and by Geoff Tudor. Hey guys, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much, Tom. Great to be here.
No, I really appreciate you guys being here. You guys have an event coming out in just a couple of days. We're going to drop this podcast on Monday, the 7th of July, and on Thursday, you guys have an event going on. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I'd like to get a little bit of your background. So, Leon, why don't we start with you? Let's go in the Wayback Machine. How did you get started in this world of space, technology, etc.?
Yeah, I'm sort of an accidental rocket scientist. So, as you might have guessed, I'm not from America. I did come to Texas as soon as I found out, in fact. But so I'm from the UK, and originally, actually, I was doing my undergrad in aerospace. And when I got done with that, I was a bit burnt out. And so I decided I'd go work in the city as an IT consultant for a Big Four consultancy firm. I lasted about 11 months. It was the best and worst decision I've ever made. Because it sort of really made me think about what it was I wanted. And I decided for whatever reason to go and take a PhD. So I took the first PhD I could get, which was in a dying field called hypersonics. And that was back in 2010. And right at the end of 2014, when I was basically graduating, the Chinese started flying hypersonic vehicles across the entire length of their country. And the US panicked a little bit, and suddenly my dead field wasn't so dead anymore. And so someone offered me a postdoc over here in Austin. I'd never heard of Austin. I thought the capital of Texas was maybe Houston or Dallas. But nonetheless, I came over. It was going to be a 2-year stint, and then I was going to go back home, and that was 11 years ago now. So here I am. But I'm a failed academic, so recovering academic maybe is a better way of putting it. While I was at UT, obviously there was the research side, but I founded a lab called the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab, and we got about $1 million in to start building the largest student-designed liquid bipropellant rocket ever conceived. We went from nothing to about 250 people in about 18 months. It really was an incredible transformative journey for me. And it also kind of taught me more about what it was I wanted to do. And that sort of spun me out into the world of startups, which is what I've been doing for about the last 4 or 5 years now, I suppose. But I never forgot about the Rocket Lab and, the sort of founding impetus for Swift when, me and Geoff came together with the rest of the board was to take some of the kind of lessons learned and the things that we'd done differently in Trell and scale them out to all of the institutions here in Texas. And so that's kind of just a quick, 11 years in 3 minutes.
No, that's good. And we'll come back to some of that, but I don't want to leave Geoff out. Geoff, let's go back in your Wayback Machine.
Yeah, well, my Wayback Machine is a little bit different than Leon here, but I had a passion for space growing up and saw kind of two paths. One, which was going into the aeronautical engineering path and the traditional, rocket scientist verbatim path. But another one I was really interested in was business. And so when I was in college at Tulane University, wrote a thesis on the commercialization of space. This was decades ago, back when, thinking about pharmaceuticals in space and remote sensing and telecoms and these types of things. And I was fortunate after graduation that landed me a job on Capitol Hill working for a Texas lawmaker by the name of Lamar Smith, Congressman Lamar Smith, who represented the Austin and San Antonio area in the Hill Country. And he hired me to be his space legislative director. And so I worked for him, helping basically craft NASA budgets, passing things like upgrades to the space shuttle's avionics systems and improvements in the propulsion systems and these things. And I really love working at that level and being a space advocate. But I was also frustrated that we didn't have a better vision for what we wanted to do in space. And at the time, there was some funding that was available, not inside of NASA, but at Department of Defense, that I was able to attach to. And over beers one night, one became a general in the Air Force and ran Ames Research Center. Another gentleman was on the Space Council, and we were sitting around having a beer, said, wow, we have all this dual-use technology that's sitting over in Department of Defense and the Pentagon at space-based interceptors, which were new CCD cameras and solar panels, much more effective solar panels, and we could build this lightweight satellite, which had never really been done before. And we said, well, how can we test it without violating the ABM treaty? So we came up with this little satellite called Clementine and a mission called Clementine. And just within a matter of years, we took that from a napkin into a spacecraft that returned to the first return mission to the moon since the 70s and discovered ice at the lunar South Pole, which is now, of course, a source of contention for which country is going to go there and use that as a depot for rocket fuel to explore the rest of the solar system. So working on Capitol Hill gave me, of course, insights as to the most important asset to explore space, which is people. And after doing that, launching that mission, funding Delta Clipper, which was the precursor to a reusable vertically launch and landing spacecraft, also worked with a Strategic Defense Initiative organization getting funding. I was on Capitol Hill making sure the funding would get shepherded into this programs. I left and entered the entrepreneurial and tech world, having done these things in the space world to pursue more commercial interests. And I've been in Austin since that time. So I've been in Austin a couple of decades here. And, well, of course, love the technology side of things. I've started a software company that was acquired by Symantec, and then another cloud storage company that was acquired by Oracle, and that brought me into the tech world. And so currently I run cloud storage for a business that's about a $6.5 billion publicly traded company. But going back into now where we are today, it's all about the passion for space. And now having kind of had some prosperity, fortunately, in the tech world, I want to give back and to help the young people that Leon and my previous generation of myself who might now be looking for a career in space, don't know where to start. And Austin's such a great city of the tech vibes and the tech entrepreneurism. If we could harness some of that enthusiasm for space, just think of the things we could do. So we started the Space Workforce Incubator for Texas to help build the bridges between academia, this really post-secondary education, whether you're UT in the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab, or maybe you're in the Rice and working on the Eclipse program, or at ACC working on their rocket program, and you want to pursue a career at Firefly or SpaceX or Blue Origin or Boeing or any of the space companies, the 2,000 or so space companies in Texas and aerospace companies, we want to help you get there, and that's what we're devoted to doing.
So that's interesting. You said 2,000 space and aerospace companies in Texas. I don't know that I would have known it was quite that large, but it is interesting because so many people who write about Austin or talk about Austin or from the outside looking in, they say things like, space tech or defense tech, which are linked and separate. They act like this is something new that's been going on in Austin for like the last 5 or 6 years. They say, well, Elon moved SpaceX there, so that's when Austin got its ties. If you look at the University of Texas, UT has been doing this type of rocket research, space research, as well as defense tech research going back decades and decades and decades. So I find it interesting that people act like Austin is just sticking its toe in the water. And certainly if we're going to think about space, with everything with NASA being located in Houston, it really does set Texas up to continue to be sort of this center of things around space. But that 2000 number, that was surprising to me.
Yeah, Texas 2036 has done a lot of the economic profiling of aerospace and defense tech in around Texas, and they put that number roughly 2,000, about 135,000 jobs, and of course billions of dollars of impact. But as you're saying, Thom, UT has a long track record of supporting our space, but also you have an institution like Southwest Research Institute that's nearby in San Antonio, and they do a lot of instruments that have flown on some of the biggest profile space missions around, and they continue to innovate around space. And so it's really all around us, and people don't necessarily know about it. And if you're a student, you might not think about that as a career path. But now, space is expected to be $1 trillion industry, depending upon Morgan Stanley and McKinsey and these estimates, $1 to $1.6 trillion business. And there's money to be made. And now that we have officially a program to go back to the moon and then onward to Mars, it's a very exciting time. If I was, 18, 19, 20, 21, thinking about where do I go post graduation, or maybe I'm a welder that is looking to have to do something in aerospace, there are jobs for you too. Titanium welding, one of the skills that we had in the 60s, we kind of lost, and now we need a lot of these days, or propulsion engineer at Firefly. There's all kind of exciting jobs in this world, and we want to help make the bridges that bring students into that career path.
So I'm going to admit that I'm old in the fact that I actually remember the day they landed on the moon in 1969. Now, I would have been 3 years old, but it was enough of a big deal in my family, and I had older brothers who were all teenagers. I remember my brother taking me outside and pointing up to the moon, and us sitting in the backyard talking about that there were people up there. But from my, 3-year-old 1960s all the way up, space was NASA. I mean, it was just the government. There wasn't this idea that we were going to commercialize it. Yeah, there were people doing satellites in the 80s and 90s and all this, but the world has changed so much. So much has opened up in this world of space. I don't think that most people have thought it through. Leon, you said you're an accidental rocket scientist. Back in the days when you were studying this stuff, did you foresee the commercialization the way it is, or was even the people studying it not really seeing where we'd be today?
Yeah, it was really hard to know. Obviously it's impossible to know what's going to happen, right? The biggest problem with going to space is entirely legislative, right? It's very, there's not a huge difference from the outside between a Saturn V and an ICBM. And so governments tend to get a little bit antsy if you start launching rockets left and right without permission and letting everyone know, So the biggest problem was always kind of this legislative piece where governments were really uncomfortable with sort of large industries running their own programs, right? And there wasn't even really a way to get a launch license unless it was through the military. That was very difficult to do. The FAA didn't really want to own it. And so my choices were maybe go work for NASA, maybe go work for ESA or some other, JAXA or some other national space agency, or maybe one or two defense contractors that kind of played in that space. And that was it. And right place, right time. I just happened to come over to America, sort of going to your earlier point, right? Firefly were founded here at Capital Factory. In fact, one of the major U.S. launch providers, a huge deal in the cislunar space in terms, they only private company to fully successfully land a lander on the moon. And a shout out to the engineer that designed the engines that did that was my test lead at Trell. So just to give you sort of a very sort of personal story for, what these programs can do, boots on the ground. Ryan Cole is the engineer who very small team that he led, developed that engine. The engines are kind of the hard part about landing the landers. and he came through Trell as one of our first test leads. And so that these opportunities for students to get into these clubs really early, and in Austin, right, or in Texas, one of the only states in the country where you have both a place that you'd want to put your headquarters and a place that you could launch a rocket, right, all in the same state. But yeah, so
it's interesting. A couple of weeks back, I interviewed a guy who is starting a lab for energy research and energy tech companies. And he talked about the fact that Texas is uniquely situated to be the leader when it comes to energy tech and new energies, et cetera. And because of, our oil and gas history and other stuff that's been developed here, I kind of feel like I'm in the same interview, and the fact that we're in that same position when it comes to, space. However, as a state, I think we need to work more together. One of the things I see is there's Austin, there's Houston, there's Dallas, there's Brazos Valley, there's San Antonio. Are we thinking in the industry of space as one, or are we still kind of in little pockets geographically?
Leon, you have a great way of looking at it about why would a company not want to be in Texas? And I think that question, Thom, merits thinking about it. If you kind of turn the question inside out, I think you can kind of get an answer.
Yeah, so, if the reason I've seen companies come here or I've seen companies leave, right, if you sort of break it out, is, Texas is a very business-friendly state. So, companies are happy to move here. They want to stay here. From that perspective, there's no problem, right? Texas is a relatively low regulatory state, right? It's very easy. Like if you're not in an MMD, a municipal district, right? Like Fireflyer up the road, an hour north of, my house in Austin, testing literal rocket engines, and not a single permit needs to be issued for them to do that, right? So again, it's not, regulatory is not the problem, right? Texas has lots of space. Texas has a lot of the other surrounding infrastructure, like oil and gas and energy and other things that rockets kind of require. And you go on through this list, and it basically has everything except maybe for two things. One thing Texas misses that some other states are better at is financial incentives, right? Either that's tax incentives, or it's direct funding or fund matching, that kind of thing, right? And that's a very tip of the spear kind of activity, right? There's only so much free money you can kind of hand out to get an industry to come to a place. At some point, the concept of capitalism breaks down when you're just paying everyone to move to your state, right? And then the only other thing, the thing that I've seen companies up and move to California, despite how difficult it is to test, despite how much more expensive it is, and despite how much higher the taxes are, like basically everything else is worse, except for the fact that you have workforce dev, right? And I think one of the things, and Huntsville, Alabama is another place, right, where they've had these really institutional aerospace kind of centers that have both done sort of formal training and informal training programs. And so to kind of put a bow on all of this, right, one of the things I think Texas does do well is the city. It's not like Dallas versus Austin versus Houston so much. Like Texas is very good at celebrating a win for any one of its cities. That's a win for Texas, right? So a bunch of semiconductors went in just outside of Dallas, right? It wasn't this huge, like, angry pitchfork thing. How are we going to beat Dallas, right? It was like, okay, great, they've got semiconductors. We're going to pick some, Austin's like, we'll do something else, right? But one of the things I don't think we do very well, right? If we're talking about 10xing the aerospace industry, right, to a $2 trillion industry, $1.8 trillion industry, twice the size of the airline industry, right, in the next 10 years, robots don't make rockets, right? Even the Tesla factory, right, with the Raptor engine, they're not made by robots. They're made by people. And that's not going to change in the next 10 years just because of the nature of the work. And so if you want to 10x the industry, you have to 10x the workforce. And they're all not that, we have a number of incredible educational institutions here in Texas and, of course, nationwide, right? But we really need to do something differently. right? If we keep doing more of the same, we're just going to get more of the same. And in fact, Eric McManus likes to say, he's part of the Space Force Association. If we use old space tools to build new space, we're going to get more old space. Right? If we don't change the paradigm won't change. And so we really need to think about how it is that we're going to mindfully and meaningfully 10x that workforce in a way that's actually sustainable, productive, right? That goes to new areas, new parts of the population that you haven't traditionally tapped into for talent in the aerospace space ecosystem. And we need to get better at changing that, because if we just do more of what we're already doing, we'll get a few more people, right? But you're not going to 10x. You're not going to get welders, right? Welders, you need a lot of space welders. You need a lot of space electricians, right? These are blue-collar jobs, ostensibly tech jobs, right? And so, again, if we continue to view space as it's rocket science, right, and it all gets done through a 4-year institution, and the 4 years are very important, don't get me wrong, but if we continue to view space through the lens of this is a university thing and everyone has to be a rocket scientist to do it, and like, we're not going to end up with the workforce we need. And I suppose that would be one of my biggest concerns with the way Texas is coming at this problem. And that's one of the biggest areas, in fact, that Swift seeks to change these things.
So that brings up a really interesting question. You've talked about electricians, you've talked about welders. What all is needed in the big thing? Because as just a outside observer, when I think of it, I think of, people going to Rice or people going to UT or A&M and becoming a rocket scientist, coming out of one of these places. But what you just said says, yeah, we need the rocket scientists, but we need a lot of other stuff. What all do we need, and how do we educate people to be ready to take these types of jobs?
Leon, that's a great question. I'm going to start and let Leon contribute. Is you put your finger on it, which is if you look at the webcam that's happening in Starbase, you're going to see a ton of activity, and it's by forklift operators, by crane operators, it is by welders, it's about craftsmen and tradesmen who are taking this stainless steel, welding it, fabricating it, testing it, bursting it, all of these things. Likewise, if you go up to Briggs here just an hour north at Firefly, you'll see the same trades. So one of the things that we have done at Swift is bring together stakeholders, both at the academics that are teaching the trades, as well as the employers, right? So with Texas State Technical College here that operates throughout the state, they have specialized primarily in the energy and the maritime industries, taking people, giving them hands-on experience welding in industrial environments over a 1-year program or a 2-year program, and after which they're certified and they can instantly go to work because they have the verified skills that they need to go immediately add value and solve problems in the marine and in the energy industry. So now, by working together, we're talking about, well, how can we do that for the space industry? And so we've sat down with Firefly, we've sat down with Texas, all in the same room, and saying, what are the gaps that you have between what TSTC is teaching in the field today for energy and maritime and what they can do, what Firefly needs? And it's like, okay, well, we need more composite manufacturing because that's a key manufacturing there. So we need to teach more hands-on composites. We need to teach more about TIG welding for things like the small pipes that are feeding the fluids into the rocket engine, right, in all these different shapes, shaping. And so it's a lot of this type of work that needs to happen. Of course, we continue to support the Rice Eclipse team, to Texas A&M Rocket Engineering Design team, the people in the 4-year institutions that are going through the full academic scholarship, but most of them the jobs don't need a 4-year degree. They can make do if they have the right hands-on skills. And hands-on skills is exactly what all of these space companies are looking for. And it's what's missing through traditional academic programs. If all you need was academic programs, Swift wouldn't be here. What people need are hands-on capabilities of, okay, what is it like to lay up a composite fin structure for a rocket? What is it like to, do a TIG welding for a titanium, things like a landing valve? What is it like to operate and burst a cryogenic valve? And I think Leon has, at the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab, he specializes in helping students make mistakes because it's through those mistakes that they learn. And that's what the big new space companies are looking for. And I don't know, Leon, what I missed out from that.
No, I mean, I think that was spot on, right? Like, it's honestly very hard to overemphasize just how theoretical rocket science isn't, right? You know, you see in universities a lot of the time, because there's so much testing and building and manufacture involved in actually doing anything with a rocket, that the students will design them theoretically, right? So you have it's a white paper, basically. It's a design. And, a rocket on paper is like a business model in Excel, right? It always works. It always says that it's actually there. And it's not until you take it to the real world that all these problems start coming up, right? And so 2/3 of the work of actually getting, building an orbital capable rocket is the fabrication of it. It's the testing of it. It's the ops, the logistics, the launch site, the permits, right? Like all these things that have, notionally very little to do with what people normally think about when they think of rocket science. It's marketing as well, by the way, because someone actually has to want to launch something, right? Like the rocket's just a vehicle. It's a figurative and literal vehicle to, our future in space, right? And yeah, it's important, but what are you going to do once you get there? That's sort of the real question, right? What is the economy to be had? What's the payload going to be? Like, how are we actually, beyond just the human exploration component and the government just sort of endlessly paying for science missions? What if this is going to be an actual economy? What does that look like, and what are we doing? So, and all of that stuff, right, that has people involved in it, and they're not thermodynamicists, they're not aerodynamicists, they're not all of the things that typically you'd think of when you think of rocket scientists, right? They're welders, electricians, they're marketers, they're business majors, MBAs, people that are building and, businesses or putting ideas together, or they're, whatever it is, right? And all of these people, none of them are rocket scientists, and we don't really have a pipeline that's building them. Right, that's saying, hey, you wouldn't necessarily think about it, but actually you can build businesses in space, or you can weld things that will send to space, or whatever it is. You can do the logistics or the planning, or someone has to cook food for people in space, right? And so now you're starting to see one company was saying they were having to find chefs. They needed to find I forget what the proper name for it was, but basically space chefs, right? It's like, okay, where do you go for that? Like, who knows how to cook things in space or for space, or so on and so on, right? So, and this is now this ecosystem that we need to build out in front of ourselves, not just the very first person, great, I've got a rocket and it flies. That's actually kind of a solved problem now, right? But what's the next step after it? And all of those people are people that, don't know that they have this incredible career future in space available to them. And that's one of the things that we're trying to make sure we do a better job of, whether that's doing it through TSTC, or whatever partner, right? Or through high schools, or through community colleges, places you wouldn't normally think about doing rocket science are going to be absolutely integral in manifesting the workforce that we're going to need to be successful in space.
So I can't wait till I'm at a dinner party and I meet my first space chef. Like when what do you do? Oh, I'm a chef for space. When that happens, I'll know that I've arrived.
Right.
So let's take the conversation now to SWIFT, the Space Workforce Incubator for Texas. So real quick, you guys have starting this week, every month, the second Thursday of the month, you're hosting an event. So let's talk a little bit about the event side and then the bigger purpose of SWIFT. So what is this event this week, next month, the month after, and why should people care?
Sure. So our ecosystem space event is just like in technology and, like the Austin technology, you have to have a community. It begins with a community. And we believe that by having an event where stakeholders that want to participate in the space economy in Texas can come together and network and make connections and converse and ideate, great things can happen. I mean, I told the story a little bit ago where I was, in my early 20s working on Capitol Hill and sat down and had a beer. We sketched out this concept on a napkin, and now it's hanging in the National Air and Space Museum. That would have never happened if we just didn't have the, getting together, right? Having these ideas. So I think that's number one, is just the community. And number two is, to connect with some folks that you might not otherwise see. At our last happy hour, we were fortunate to have a retired astronaut, Tim Kopra, who attended. He is the CEO of Starlab. Their parent company, Voyager Space, just went very successful public offering. And he's building a private space station to replace the International Space Station that's going to be retired in 2030. And he's going to have a complete private space station that will need space chefs, at least on the ground, to make to take the food. But that's just one example. And you're going to meet folks from all the different walks of life. So if you're interested in a career in space, or maybe you're in a tech startup that is would like to be adjacent or work with the space industry, we'd welcome you to come out and have a professional networking event.
So I recently had a conversation with somebody who is involved with an organization in another vertical of technology, and she was saying they can't seem to get off the ground. And I said, one of the things is I know who the group is. I go, you're very sheltered. You only want square pegs to go in your square hole. You only are inviting people who are just like you. And my advice was, don't try to be, and I won't name the vertical, don't try to make this vertical famous in Austin, attached to the fact that the whole technology community in Austin is famous, and look for some of those serendipities. Have open events and invite people. And then the next day I ran across Swift and saw you were doing exactly what I referred another vertical. If you want to get a foothold in Austin, join the whole community. Don't try to say, oh, we're space and we're just looking for spacey people. But have an open event where people can come and the collisions can happen, right? Those conversations, people who their company, they may not even know they're space adjacent. And all of a sudden they're like, well, we can do that. What made you say, because if you think about it, this other industry is broader. What made you say, let's kick this off by inviting the whole community? I put it in the ATC newsletter, right? Going out to the whole community. What made you do that rather than saying, let's create a curated little private vertical?
Well, I will attribute that completely to our amazing board. Leon and I met each other at a conference along with one of the other directors for the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab, and seeing these students and seeing what the students, and these students aren't rocket scientists. Some of these students that are building and launching out in the desert of West Texas are philosophy major and communication majors. So it was kind of that. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that students had a hands-on rocket program at UT. I was like, well, it's not a UT program. It's actually a club, a club that had sponsorship, the Texas Rocket Engineering Lab. And I said, we need to take this as this is a great model. We should have this at every community college and make it accessible across the state. And that's really where this concept of Swift comes in, to give students, no matter where they are, if they're at ACC or maybe they want to go to ACC, to participate in a rocket curriculum, right? Or a space curriculum. We want to give that chance. So that's what got us started. But what keeps us together is to have amazing board members like Harvin Moore, who is a long time.
Harvin's awesome. I know Harvin. He's awesome.
Well, See, he talked about a community. He did. Joseph Kupster came out of West Point in the military and understands dual use technologies.
And who doesn't know Joseph Kupster?
See, so if you have good board members, if there's no other lesson than that, get good board members and great things happen. And so anyway, we're very fortunate. Heather Wagner-Reed, who is just amazing, and of course Leon. We have a great group, and but a board is, it's great. We can sit around and tell each other stories all day, but it's about the community, and we want to bring the community into it. And the community, and going back to people like Ryan Cole, who was a student at UT, and for whatever reason answered the flyer to go take a hands-on rocket class. Well, now he is the only person to design a propulsion system to successfully land on, and I say only person to successfully land on the lunar surface, right? That is a huge thing. Japan just tried again. They did not land it. From a private company perspective, Firefly is the only one to stick the landing in a lunar thing. And so you never know where these things are going to happen. You're having a beer one day and then you're landing on the moon, a couple of years later. It's really cool.
I say it all the time that real leaders show up. If you don't show up in the community, if you don't, stick your toe in the water once in a while, you're not really a leader, and you're not going to have that serendipity of things that can happen like we're talking about here. Now, you're the Space Workforce Incubator for Texas. So we're starting in Austin, right? You're going to have your parties, your gatherings at Capitol Factory. But what about the rest of the state? What are the plans to make this a statewide venture?
So I will start. I'm going to turn it over to Leon. We, Swift is obviously about Texas, and it's about making Texas work. So we had just signed a letter of agreement. Why don't you talk about that, Leon, in terms of taking this outside of Austin?
Yeah, the part of us that's an incubator, right, is we exist to help in the creation and furtherance of student rocket groups across the state, right? We're not trying to be a rocket club ourselves, right? There's so many incredible institutions already that have some degree in them. We're trying to be sort of an incubator for those existing clubs, helping them to get going, helping them to take it to the next level. So, for example, we are helping UT Permian Basin to launch a rocket club out there. They actually, Midland is an incredible, it has a space port in it, the Midland Spaceport, and a number of companies that are testing there. And they have a rocket competition that runs every year out there called the International Rocket Engineering Competition, IREC, right? Literally hundreds of teams come from all across the world. We were there a few weeks ago, whenever it was, right? You've got teams from Australia, teams from India, teams from Turkey, like teams from all over the world, and obviously within the US come. But Midland didn't have a team, right? And so we've just started with UTPB to help them get a team going. We're talking to ACC, helping them to get a hybrid rocket, program going at ACC. And there's a number of other institutions around Texas that we're helping the student groups to accelerate and to sort of next level the quality of the rockets that they're making and launching, and through them sort of bringing the experiences to those student groups and hopefully beyond down into high schools through dual credit programs and so forth. That's how it is that we then plug in to the rest of the state. We're not trying to do it all ourselves. It's not about what we want. It's about naturally letting students in any location, another group we're helping is Texas State Technical College, which are basically a statewide community college. And we're helping them to do training for Firefly and others, right, to qualify welders, electricians, and so forth. So, these are all the different ways that you can, on ACC's terms or TSTC's terms or the terms of the students, meet them where they are. Right? Don't try to create, like exactly as you said, don't try to create an environment and say, no, you have to come to me, you have to do rocket science the way I want to do it. No, Swift is going to enable you, whoever you are, statewide, to be part of this community in a way that is meaningful and realistic for you, right? And it's very interesting because you see places like Starbase, right, and down in Brownsville, they struggle to hold on to people, right? A lot of these test facilities are purposefully out in more remote areas, and they struggle to staff them. And the most obvious one is, well, if you staff them with people that already live there, right? People from the Rio Grande Valley like living in the Rio Grande Valley, so just train them. Instead of trying to get some 4-year kid to learn enough welding and then move from wherever you found them down to Brownsville, which is going to be definitely a change in speed from probably what they're normally used to. Hire Brownsville, people from Brownsville. It's a much easier way to meet those needs, and ultimately everyone will be happy with that kind of model. So that's how we kind of attack that problem.
So I'm loving this conversation and this idea of collaboration, right? I mean, my personal belief is, community collaboration and conversations can solve all problems. And you guys seem to sort of embrace that same sort of vibe. And that's, what Austin Technology Council, the way I look at it is, if we can help a vertical in tech thrive, all of tech thrives. So, this idea of, fintech and space tech and deep tech and all this, we shouldn't have these verticals walled off. We have to have those threads running through them because this is the way ideas happen and all this. So I'm loving this conversation, but I want to take it back as we wrap it up. You've both been in Austin a long time, 11 years, 30 years. I want to take a look at what you've seen, right? There's been huge growth over that time. I've lived here 34 years. There were 700,000 people when I moved to Austin in the greater area. There's now 2.5 million, and we've built one road. So, we've got some growing pains. What do you see when you look at tech in general, not just space, but tech? What do you say when you see our community that's good and what should we keep doing? And maybe what are some areas we need to really think about?
Leon, I'm going to let you go first on that.
All right. I will say I've been quite impressed. Austin does deep tech, hard tech very well. It's kind of something that a lot of people, as you pointed out earlier, don't know is here. I think of Apptronic, right? Austin's answer to Boston Dynamics, yep. Right? Firefly Aerospace, right? There's countless companies that do all manner of things you'd never ordinarily think about here in Austin. And sort of more broadly in Texas. And so that's something I've always been really pleasantly surprised with, that it wasn't just this like Silicon Valley sort of like software, super scalable, that people were out there doing some really hard things that candidly do take 10 years plus, right? Because, software is just a lot more sort of scalable, deployable, right? You don't just click a button and deploy a rocket launch site. You'd spend 5 years building and testing and qualifying it. And if you're lucky, it works at the end, right? And you're not bankrupt. So that would sort of be a pro I've definitely seen, and sort of the ecosystem that sort of supports that as well, right? But I guess one of the things I don't think I'm always surprised by is how the sort of the VC funding element here, despite this thriving community, I don't feel it's especially well, I don't know if financed is the right word, but I'm just always really surprised that Austin ranks as low down as it does on the list of trying to get funding for ideas and sort of being kind of a hub of enterprise. And I don't really understand why. Candidly, I think a lot of people are sort of asking those same questions. You'd think with all the money that Texas has, right, and the sort of the closeness of LPs and family offices to VCs, that it would be a no-brainer, but somehow it hasn't ever really come together. So that would sort of perhaps be my one critique. You need some rocket fuel for the rocket, you need some money for the companies.
And it's interesting because, we have people, who always brag, hey, Austin, we're number 4 in venture funding. And I always point out when number 1, San Francisco, San Jose, is $38 billion, and we're number 4 at $4 billion, somebody might argue 5, whatever. We're not really number 4. We're number 14, and the Valley just took the first 10 spaces.
Right.
And the other thing is the Austin Technology Council is part of a group called TECNA, the Technology Councils of North America. And I always look at the fact that there are cities who have much less venture funding than we are, who are still doing some very interesting, positive things in the world of tech. And so I often worry that, not that we don't want to grow that, because we certainly would like to see more than, $4 billion coming into this area. But there's still ways to do it, even without having the VCs here. I mean, there's other cities who are really good at getting California money into their communities. Maybe not at the level, that we see here, but it is just interesting that we're number 4, but, we're still $34 billion less than number 1.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Geoff, anything you want to add to that Austin piece?
I would just say it's so interesting. I would have said 29 years ago what Leon just said, which is it would be great to have more money and investors. The old saying is VCs are lazy. I hope I'm not offending anybody, but they don't want to get out of the Sand Hill Road and hop on the Southwest or the United flight down here. Look, it's never been a better time for Austin for a couple of reasons. One, because for better, for worse, certainly for the worse for traffic, and for worse for maybe cost of housing, cost of living, but for better in terms of diversity of business opportunity, Austin's finally having its day. The day that you and I knew was going to happen 20 years ago. It is happening right now as being a magnet for young folks that want to start their companies. The Gen Z folks that want to move into a city that's still relatively cost affordable, even if it's on the outskirts, but has a very vibrant community. So that's great. But number two is that there is a kind of an emerging dual use technology corridor. You know, we have some defense tech, space tech, aerospace companies that are getting funded and starting here. Cesium, Firefly, you're going to see Slingshot has an office here. So you're going to see more of that, I believe, as companies migrate out of the high regulatory, high tax locations, which is only getting worse, unfortunately, into more of a low regulatory, lower tax environment. So that's gonna be helping. And finally, I'll say this: like, if there's one thing that I hope for Austin is that we get more, AI centric focus of applying AI into things like manufacturing. And there's a organization here just starting up, HiCam, which is building a very phenomenal facility. They just opened their first phase of that off of the near not too far from Tesla. And they're doing advanced manufacturing, leveraging AI and getting companies in to do that. I think when you combine AI and you combine space and new space, holy smokes, some amazing things are going to be possible. Rapid iteration of rocket designs, 3D printing, all of these things. And so Austin, being more of a light industrial town, if you count the gigafactory out of it, I think it's just going to become a hub for more and more of that. As Leon mentioned, the favorable regulatory environment. Starlink, biggest printed circuit board manufacturing facility, I believe, in the world now,
yep.
or certainly in North America and other things. So it's very exciting time. I can't wait to see what happens next month. There might be a new skyscraper. It's hard to keep track. I come back to the airport and not really in Austin.
That's exactly. Yeah, I one time recently was watching a TV commercial, and the second time it aired, I saw the skyline. I'm like, I didn't even know that was Austin in the background. It's like, I've lived here for 34 years. I didn't recognize my own city in a TV commercial. So,
it's pretty cool.
But to everything that you just said, it is true. We have this diverse and growing and deep bench of different technologies that are being developed and deployed here. And yet still the Wall Street Journal will write an article that say, well, Austin's days as a tech hub are over. And it's like, I don't think so. I don't think there's ever been a better time for tech, regardless of the vertical of tech. I don't think there's ever been a better time than now and the future to be in Austin.
100%. And that's okay. If the Wall Street Journal says folks aren't coming, maybe it'll get a little less relief on the pressure. But those who come down here know where the heartbeat of tech. And, look, where's Optimus Prime being built, right? Like, it's just right now. I mean, there's so much innovation. And I think we're going to have a group of spin-outs that we can't imagine in 10 and 15 years of ancillary industries. You have, of course, Samsung investing billions of dollars in semiconductors. Semiconductors have always been strong. Remember, it used to be Silicon Hills for a while. But, if you take light manufacturing, robotics, aerospace, and put those together, that's going to be the future of American competitiveness. And, Austin has never been better positioned to lead in that.
I was quoted the other day in something in the Statesman, and my comment was, we're not just a tech hub, we're a science city when you really look at what's happening. And I've received a whole bunch of calls going, "Ooh, I like that. Where did you come up with that?" I'm like, I don't know. It just came out of my mouth. In the fact that we're, I'm
going to thumbs up that one because I love that one. That's
Austin, we're a science city is my new. I'm going to print T-shirts. So
I love it.
Hey, any last words from either one of you as we sign this off?
Well, like you said, I hope that folks are just, if they're interested in exploring space as an avenue of employment or business or education, that they stop by our ecosystem space events that are at the Capitol Factory on Thursday, and we'll take it from there.
Second Thursday of every month, right?
Second Thursday of every month, absolutely.
Nice. Well, Leon, Geoff, thank you so much for being here on Austin Tech Connect, and I look forward to seeing you at some either tech events or space events in the near future.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to everybody who tuned in and listened. You know what? Why would we do the podcast if it wasn't for the audience? But we're trying to grow it, which means I need every one of you to take this link and share it with everybody you know in the whole world who touches tech. Okay, that might be a bit much, but you could tell your coworkers, you could post something on social media and say, hey, check out this podcast. As I say, it sucks less than other podcasts, right? It's you've stuck around for 50 minutes now, so hopefully you got something good out of listening to the conversation with Leon and Geoff. And we'll be back next week with an interview with somebody just as interesting who's doing cool things right here in Central Texas. Thank you.